Hello and welcome back, everybody, to this episode of the International Cannabis Conversation. I'm your host, Chris Day, co-founder of the Global Cannabis Network Collective, and we are still recording here at the 10th anniversary of MJ BizCon. It's so cool to be able to see the industry from around the world come together, really after almost 2 full years of not being able to connect in person. You can just feel the buzz and see the deals getting done, both here domestically in the United States and around the world. So I want to thank TRICHOMES for allowing us to continue to produce this great podcast and talk to people, really having an impact on expanding emerging markets and bringing global cannabis together. Today, I am honored and excited to have David Curry, VP of Media and Public Relations from Insta Dose Pharma Corporation out of Canada, here with me. So David, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, it's super great to be here.
Yeah, so any trouble getting out of Canada down here? I mean, once it was wheels up, we were in good shape, I assume.
Once we were on the plane, well, it was mostly smooth sailing, but we got here in the end, and with all the kind of the loopholes and regulations. But it's good to be back out on an airplane and traveling and seeing people face to face.
Yeah, I got really used to seeing people in those little 2-inch square boxes on video conference, and it's kind of funny because as I've been meeting people, several folks who I know quite well at this point, virtually. I met in person, and we had to reintroduce ourselves because you just don't ever look quite the same on camera.
Well, you just don't know how tall people are.
That's exactly right. So, David, tell me a little bit about Insta Dose and what you guys are all about.
So Insta Dose was founded in 2018, and I suppose it's focused on establishing the world's largest continual supply of medicinal cannabis. And it came about where our founder has a history in large-scale agriculture in many countries in the developing world, and saw the opportunity for cannabis and the need in the market for companies like pharmaceutical companies and food and beverage companies that are starting to look into what the potential is for cannabis and its constituent parts. And so it took that opportunity to start growing out growing platforms and distribution platforms to be able to do that, which of course, as you know, is a complicated and arduous journey because it's a world of disruption and it's a world of working with governments and changing perceptions. And so but it's been a fantastic journey and really exciting to be part of.
Good. Yeah. Well, and I know, one of the things I appreciated in talking to you sort of in the pre-show prep yesterday was that when we were discussing the show, it really you weren't all that concerned about projecting the company image of Insta Dose. It was really about the mission behind it, right? Of helping to fulfill that supply chain. And in doing so, helping a lot of these emerging markets find a market opportunity. And we were specifically discussing what's going on in Africa and some of the efforts there. So I haven't done an episode about the African markets in probably 6 or 7 months. So it would be really interesting to get sort of your perspective on what's happening there and how you guys are trying to make an impact.
Yeah, we work in a number of countries in Africa, and it's a place that's really hard to paint with one brush. Each country has its unique history and development of the business and where it's come from. Also, from the perspective of doing business in Africa, it's a big learning curve as you go along. And I think Insta Dose has benefited from the fact that our founders spent a lot of time working in certainly in agriculture and in businesses that involve the land over a long period of time, and really understands how you need to engage with people. And it's a different way of doing business than if you were just doing it in Canada or the United States or just generally in Europe. And so it's that journey of whether you're doing business in the Congo or whether you're doing business in South Africa, how you engage with people, how you engage with the different levels of government, and understand their history, understand their sensitivities, and try to assist them, because there's There's going to be a lot of pitfalls. Actually, I was just talking to someone who works a lot in Central Africa, and he kind of congratulated our efforts. He goes, most people by this time would have just kind of torn all their hair out and ran away, because there are so many frustrations from the perspective of a Westerner, but it's trying to get your head around a different way that things operate and to help yourself move forward. And certainly we've had our successes and our failures, pitfalls, but we've really grown together. And it's been an amazing journey, and I think it's rewarding for everybody involved.
Yeah, so I know in the past when I've talked, we've really focused on discussions around Lesotho and South Africa, but you mentioned the Congo.
Yeah.
So tell me what's happening there and how that's progressing, because we haven't discussed that on the show at all.
Yeah, I think over a long period of time, there's been kind of opportunities for large-scale growing, and I think there are a number of companies are trying to work in the Congo to develop growing programs, similar to what's gone on in South Africa, in Lesotho, and other countries like Cameroon and Mozambique, which are also trying to come online. When you're looking at the Congo, it's a fascinating place. It's gifted with some of the most precious metals and resources in the world. I think it's something in the line of $24 trillion of rare earth metals in the ground. It has some of the largest spaces of arable land in all of Africa. It covers about the same landmass as Central Europe. It also is the second largest rainforest in the world. And it has a population of nearly 200 million people. But on the flip side, you are also dealing with a country that has a huge colonial legacy from Belgium in the past. It's trying to deal with the politics of trying to move forward as a country, and they're looking for opportunities and ways to emerge in what I would call a new African Renaissance, which is starting to happen right now. So in the Congo, we just had the first president to ever be elected with a peaceful exchange of power.
It's nice when that can happen.
It's really,
right.
It
really helps function business better.
It really does, and I think that they're very aware of how Westerners perceive the issues of doing business in Africa, the issues of corruption, the issues of paperwork and bureaucracy and red tape, and they are now more open to going, how do we turn this around? How can we help? Or how can we help ourselves? How can we help you? How can you help us? And so it's really about creating partnerships and having understanding with a full knowledge of where they've come from and where they want to get to. And
that's a recurring theme throughout the world. I think it's particularly interesting broadcasting from MJ BizCon and wandering the halls here, because it is such a North American perspective, right? And when I founded the GCNC, it was really to create that communication bridge and that cultural bridge and understanding. I've been so fortunate throughout my life to be able to travel and meet people from all over, and being able to bring that into cannabis and really look at it as creating bridges that always require sort of two-way travel, right? You don't build a bridge just to take your stuff over there and give it all and tell everybody what to do. It creates a cultural exchange.
Yeah, it has to be.
And cannabis is one of those great industries that is, since it's now resurgent, I guess, in a legal capacity, being able to see that as a cultural exchange has been both mystifying and gratifying all at the same time for me since entering the industry myself.
Yeah, I kind of I absolutely agree with that. And it's I'm new in many ways to this business, but I think a lot of people are new into the international wholesale journey that's happening. What's going on behind the commoditization of an agricultural SKU, as it were. But it's an incredible one because of the social and economic impact that's going to have in places in the developing world. the opportunity that's presented to people. And when I started this, I certainly wasn't aware of how connected this is to things like gender politics. 78% of the farmers in Africa are women. 80% of the people who work in agriculture, even up to distribution, are women. That's, there's a huge issue of gender politics there. And also with a product or with cannabis, you're looking at something that has it's massively more valuable to a farmer growing. You're looking at something that's between 50 to 70 times more valuable than a regular staple crop at the farm gate. And what impact is that going to have? What impact is it going to have on things like education, on food and water, security, on roads, on electricity, on, it's going to have an incredible, it's an incredibly powerful plant. And also, it's a plant, it's called weed for a reason. It just grows, and something you can just
in
pop
the right places.
In the right places, and the developing world is one of those places, like the Congo, where it's a green, renewable resource that is also making a net contribution to the climate issues that we have right now.
Right, and looking at cannabis, industrial hemp, these crops are regenerative. They help actually regenerate the soil.
Yes.
We can use the plant then for all kinds of different uses, not only the consumption uses that people generally think of.
Mm-hmm.
And I know working with and sort of coalescing these farms help support things like, the UN Sustainable Development Goals,
mm-hmm.
really helping to create more equality through business in ways that you can't just throw $1 billion from someplace in there and say, hey, go do it. This is actually through collaboration and cooperation to use, frankly, pipelines that have existed forever between Africa and Europe, for example, for commodities. This is now just one. If we can get past the stigma and the politics, it will ultimately flow as a commodity in many ways, and also in specialized products.
Yeah, and you're just talking about stigma and what that means in Africa, for example. In many ways, when you look back a few years ago, very similar to stigmas that we were dealing with here in North America, but it's even deeper, culturally ingrained so deeply into these societies by their colonial past, and how to help them get over that. And how to get populations to understand that, this product isn't necessarily about being a bad drug. It's about being a plant that has opportunity. It's about, and there are other places in the world where people consider this plant to be a healing plant. That there are other places which are looking for the components of this plant. That, and helping them to understand, why are these people coming here and wanting to grow this?
Right.
And yet on the flip side, it pretty much, you can find cannabis almost everywhere,
mm-hmm.
and yet it's still so taboo. And so it's a lot of this is through education and, saying it's okay.
Right.
We can help.
Both of us have backgrounds in communications
mm-hmm.
and presenting ideas. I have found when I talk to students, for example, at universities, and I'm asked to talk about marketing and communications, I always have to tell people, you can choose to use your powers for good or ill. And the war on drugs, the stigma that has been created, shows just how effective communications can be when used for ill. And so it's really our job now to reset that and continue to talk about what everyone knew 150 years ago,
I absolutely agree.
And actually more recent than that, about the plant. And like anything, things can be abused or not used correctly, but the truth is the opportunities of the plant, not only economically to change lives and help people, but also through medicine and textiles and everything else, is huge.
Yeah,
so.
It truly is incredible. And there are so many other products that either have escaped the stigma, that live kind of in the same realm, and I would even consider things like alcohol, nicotine, and even sugar, for that matter, where have quietly always made their way. Well, cannabis had to make a little detour, but now it's coming kind of back into the world of understanding. And talk about a product that does even less damage,
Right.
overall, and has such potential.
Yeah, I think it's great. So as we've got a couple of minutes left, and I always like to sort of ask the forward-looking, crystal ball kind of question. And when we look at Insta Dose and creating this global supply chain for cannabis, how do you see that sort of rolling out over the next couple of years? And then we'll get, really sort of futurist here and say 10 years from now, because in cannabis, that's a heck of a long time. But, where do you see that going, and how do you see Insta Dose playing the role there?
I think Insta Dose has really built up a supply chain through many countries around the world, which each have unique regulations. But the idea of kind of centralizing some of the processing and distribution for large-scale cannabis to be able to provide large-scale pharmaceutical and F&B with a consistent supply of product on a regular basis where it's just not possible right now.
Yep.
And we're right on the cusp of that happening. And it truly is exciting knowing all of the things that are going to come into play over the next year. It's amazing.
And if you look at the Congo as an example,
Yeah.
and you say, where is the market for cannabis grown in the Congo? Is there going to be a domestic market in the short term, or are we really looking at an export market of products, for example, into Europe or other places?
I think that, so right now, everything that would come out of the Congo would have to be export, because they are not at the stage where they are ready to have a domestic market for that. But I think potentially in the future, as they see the opportunity, it may make sense to have some processing there and have kind of a domestic African market that may grow out of that. That's not today,
Right.
but a lot of the product that's going to come out, and quantity of product which is going to go in through distribution through channels in Europe.
Yeah, I think a nation that size,
Yeah.
like many countries, there's certain benchmarks that happen in every country as it comes out, right? The first is, yes, we want to grow, but the stigma's still there, and so we're going to send it all to other places. And then when they start to grow, they realize it's not the
Not
great
so bad
evil
after
that they
all.
think, and they want to be able to take care of, rightfully so, the people in their home country, and the laws change. So it's on track,
Yeah,
right? I think it's just a matter of what is the timing and how does that roll out.
Yeah,
So-
and I think we can play a big part in helping that journey by pouring back a lot into these communities, by showing them that this plant has the power for change, and here, like, we really want to help and grow with them. And that's a journey that we can all go on. And I think it's going to take a lot of other people. I think Insta Dose, we're leading this going forward. There are not a lot of other people who are at the stage that we are. There will be other people who will come in and do this, but as you know, it's a big world, it's
Yes.
a big market, and we need other players to come in. We need other people to help, because it will just help to open things up for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell GCNC members and companies that I talk to all around the world, yes, you have to be aware of your competition. Everybody does. It's unwise business not to be. However, within cannabis at the moment, you also cannot afford to skip the idea of co-opetition, because if we
Absolutely.
don't work together to continue to expand the market, there's plenty of wolves at the door willing to try and keep this industry in a box. And so as we grow it and work with people around the world, we have to be responsible in those markets. We have to help these markets to be sustainable long term and to give back. And it's great talking to you and working with Insta Dose and hearing about a company that's trying to do just that every day. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks so much for having me here, and I love talking about this.
Perfect. Well, we'll have to do it again. We'll do like an update show in 3 or 4 months and see what next steps are. How's that?
Absolutely. I think that would be a super idea.
Perfect. And everybody out there in podcast land, thank you so much to listening to this episode of the International Cannabis Conversation. If you haven't subscribed, you really should do so. Hit that little button down at the bottom. Hit subscribe so that you can hear from us every 2 weeks with a new show covering the global cannabis market.